الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين. I know it's late. I know it's very late. And I thank you all for sticking around for such an important topic. You know, we constantly hear in the news this issue of youth radicalization. And alhamdulillah, we've actually had very few cases from the United States. Even though very few cases of actual youth going out overseas and actually joining groups and fighting on their behalf. Even though we have to agree that even one case is too many. And so we want to have a good understanding of why is it that today you find people going and doing this, whereas 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you didn't have as much. There's a certain socio-political structure that's in place that has helped us, that even today with all of that we have, we compare ourselves against Europe, for example, where you've had a lot more young people go and join extremist groups in the Middle East. Relatively speaking, the United States has been very few, comparatively, right? Why? It's important for us to understand this and to also ask, is something going to change tomorrow? Is something going to change a year from now? So the United States government has historically not engaged in open discriminatory policies, rule of law against immigrants. And as such, a lot of immigrants who came to the country believed in the system, believed in its fairness, and society as a whole, in terms of how people were treated, by and large, was not openly racist. I emphasize not openly racist. People may have held beliefs, but openly they weren't so. And so you had waves of immigrants who have come into the United States, were able to settle, they worked the system, they became part of the system, and things are generally okay. When things are not working right, you go through the court system, you expect to get justice. And again, keep in mind a big difference between systemic discrimination through policies and procedures and rules of law versus hidden discrimination that somebody might have and they abuse certain laws to get you. So systemic discrimination is a major issue. Hidden discrimination is always there. There's very little you can do about it. Simultaneous to this, the fact that you had laws that were seemingly positive, you also had the predominant understanding of Islam being a balanced, comprehensive understanding of Islam across the country. Whichever organization it was, by and large, you had this balanced understanding of Islam coming in. And this was the norm and still is the norm in the United States. The other half, I only spoke about the immigrants, right? So the other half of the Muslim community in terms of numbers is the African American community. Extremist understanding of Islam did not exist within the African American community because the large waves of the community, when they accepted and they came into Islam, had leaders like Imam Waridin Muhammad rahimahullah, who guided the community into, again, a very balanced understanding of Islam. So you have both of these factors playing in. Historically, you've had rules and policies that seemed fair, that seemed okay, and you also had this positive understanding of Islam there. We today are enjoying the fruits of this. What happens going forward? What happened post 9/11? Government policy changed and shifted radically, very, very quickly. From the passing of the Patriot Act to a whole series of laws that came after, and policies that were established were openly discriminatory against Muslims. Even now, very recently, after Ferguson and what happened in New York, the Department of Justice said, you know, we're changing our system in terms of how racial profiling is done, except against Muslims. Racial profiling will still be allowed. That huge loophole will still be there. You can still be profiled at the border. You'll still be treated differently from a Muslim perspective. So Muslims are in some ways treated as guilty until proven innocent. Again, I'm talking about policies and laws that essentially exist at times. how you are treated versus somebody else is treated. So one thing that changed from before is the policies, right? Government policies, not just foreign but domestic policy. A second thing that has changed from the past is that previously we were in some ways insulated from the rest of the world. So the fact that we had this balanced understanding of Islam and it was predominant in the United States, it stayed that way. But now you have, through the freedom of the internet, exposure to all sorts of ideologies, all sorts of thinking, all around the globe. And so now you have this extremist thinking that exists overseas. It may not exist here, but it exists overseas. And folks here are getting exposed to that. And as a result of which, you wonder in which direction the future will go. We have to recognize this. And this is not just, me making things up. There was a research study done on Osama bin Laden's statements, public statements that he made in support of his cause. And if you want, look up the Minaret of Freedom Institute. They published this report in 2011. And they found that of all of his statements, he would justify his actions because of US policy twice as much as giving any kind of Islamic reasoning. He was not relying on Islamic ideology to drive his cause. He was citing, the US is doing this, the US is doing this, the West is doing this, policy actions to justify what he was doing. A recent Gallup study confirmed this, 2014 study called The Views of Violence, where human governance and human policies, rather than religious views, that are the major factor in driving extremist behavior. Policies, laws, human thinking, rather than ideologies. This sudden jihad syndrome that many of the news outlets have coined, where you go from a secular, non-practicing person to suddenly flipping overnight and becoming a radical. What is the influence here? It's not ideology, it's not an Islamic line of thinking. It is, again, somebody getting upset with a lot of policies that are out there. So what do we need to do? I leave you briefly and the others will pick up on this, inshallah. There are two elements to this, external and internal. Externally, if we know that our government policies are driving and causing frustration and they cause people to act in certain ways, then we need to get engaged. We need to get engaged at the grassroots level with our local politicians, with the Congress people, with the senators, and help to shape US policies, help to change the laws. Yes, there are discriminatory laws on the books today. There's a process to change them. Congress makes those laws, Congress can change those laws. Are we engaged in helping to change those laws? Are we getting the right folks elected? Are we getting allies of justice, not just Muslims, engaged on the same platform because they care about this as much as anybody else? You see so many non-Muslims making the statements like, listen, this is not my United States. I care about justice, I care about values. You have all of this. Using this, we can change many of the policies, many of the laws that are in place. And that would then change, again, the frustration level that sometimes you feel that, I'm being targeted not because of anything else, but because of my religion. And second thing is, yes, you have this exposure to this extremist ideology that's coming through primarily through the internet. Well, we should be vigilant about that. Yes, it exists. Educate ourselves on what is being taught outside and what reality Islam actually teaches. The more we know, the less we will get impacted. Study after study has shown that the more engaged you are with the masajid, the more understanding of Islam you have, the less likely you are to get radicalized. So it's up to us to know this and to make sure others know this and make sure you are not a pawn in somebody else's game, that you are the one who will be used. We have to speak up amongst ourselves and with others and to point out that, listen, there are these two elements to this whole radicalization issue. It's not just as the media and sometimes others make it out to be, oh, you know what, Islam is a radical religion. Oh, you have this extremist ideology. You have some elements who have twisted the faith and taken it to an extreme. But research has shown a lot of people, when they act, they're acting out of frustration based on policies that are out there. And that's something that we can work on. As positive citizens of this country, getting engaged and helping to change that process will help and keep things going again from the history to what the United States was to where it's headed. I think we can get back and inshallah work on that. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.